I had to look up Stuxnet again to remind myself it wasn't just a bad dream. Several years ago I had seen a video by a well-known computer security company to NATO generals about Stuxnet, and then got another video and then write-ups. But it was only 2 years after that that the story broke in the New York Times and raised a storm of protest by elected members of the American elite. You see, Stuxnet is a highly sophisticated 50,000 lines of code, a malicious computer worm that attacks Siemens programmable logic controller boxes, and is especially nasty. The worm spends some time to see what is the normal operations, records those normal operations, then changes the normal operations but sends out information that the box is running normally. Where it was used and why it was developed and by whom it was developed is obviously shrouded in secrecy, and I do not claim to know that. But this strategy in various forms has been known by social engineers, political engineers, economic engineers, and propagandists for quite some time. They measure what the people think they want to be normal, then control the media spin, the schools, the corporations, and the government spokespeople, change the normal, and then feed people stories that things are still normal. Edward Bernays' 1928 book, Propaganda, was the great-great-granddaddy for Stuxnet, if you will. But make no mistake, perception management has been around a long time. As we can cite Sun Tzu, all war is based on deception. But here is the kicker. To be long-lasting, within managed perception, the very idea of managing perception is introduced, making people think that they are not currently also victim of an agenda of managed perception. This is to avoid the problem of the silence is deafening phenomenon. This self-introduction is a self-defense subroutine of any successful controlled narrative. It is hidden by drawing attention to itself. Hidden in plain sight, as we say. In a rigged system, one merely raises the idea of another rigged system, and it makes it seem like the current system is not the rigged system. A poker player just offhandedly makes a reference at the right moment, hopefully, of catching a cheater. Thus, I will not be a cheater. The leaders of the mob say that the appointed enemies are acting irrationally. Thus, the mob cannot be acting irrationally. Stock market economists imagine what would constitute an overvaluation of share price, thus giving the idea that the current historically high overvaluation of shares is not an overvaluation. One cannot begin to see perception management unless this self-defense subroutine is first disabled. Today we are given to believe that we cannot live in Orwell's dystopian world, as political engineers are publicly asked to give their impression of what the world would look like under an Orwellian 1984 scenario. And they respond with sufficiently different scenarios from the current state that no one could imagine that this world is that Orwellian 1984 system. Yet, go back 50 years and the political engineers described the current world as their interpretation of Orwell's scenario. Luckily for us, those tapes have been lost, erased from history. A waking dream is when the answer to the question, am I dreaming, is answered as a yes, and then you can control the dream. But if you ask from within a system of managed perception whether this is reality, one cannot just answer a question yes or no. One must instead seek out information on tactics and goals and outcomes. Determining motives is impossible and is a common trick by those protecting the managed perception, as well as some authentically curious, because we cannot know and do not know all the players, and it is impossible to look inside the human heart to determine real motivations. But we can perhaps answer the question of who benefits from the results of any of the specifics of the tactics and goals of the managed perception. Oftentimes, one does not need to know the specifics of an outcome to know that one gains benefit from that outcome. My team wins the game and I win my bet, whether it is a rout, a narrow victory, or a successful cheat. This is ultimately unimportant. Thus the question of who benefits from the results of the tactics and goals is unimportant. Why did the FBI not find out and tell the people who advertised on Craigslist for the actors for Charlottesville recently? Do the FBI have a hand in this? Distraction is a tactic, and so the media is talking about Trump and not about why that car was allowed to park for so long at the top of the road, or why the driver spent nearly 2 months in the military. Time and time again, the public narrative is diverted from what can be determined in reality to what cannot be determined in reality, and which must remain necessarily speculation. This is the conflict that Mgtow sees between the hard facts of reality and the mist of ideologies, between freedom and a violent matrix, between sanity and a blue pill manufactured delusion. I have heard many Mgtow recognize recent perception management tactics to turn men against men, the old and tested tactic of divide and conquer. Get people to attack themselves, and regardless of who wins, some groups will benefit. Whatever the managed perception is, it is not reality, and men have no stake in a delusion. However, the visualizations play out. Only what you see in your own circle can be trusted. Only those who you know and trust can be trusted. Professionals and talking heads are conflicted, bought out, and serving to further the managed perception. The trouble with placing people into a managed perception is that reality, like a mist, cannot be controlled forever. Sooner or later, reality will appear, and the ideological bubble will burst. The emperor will be seen to have no clothes. In those priceless words within Jurassic Park, life finds a way, and reality is life. Whether an overwhelming majority of Virginians wish the Confederate statues taken down is a question of reality. Manufactured perception can have a handful of paid protesters on both sides, and one ex-military patsy drive a car to lock down and control the narrative. First it is the Confederate generals, then it is slave-owning presidents like Thomas Jefferson. And as Jefferson wrote the American Constitution, it is the U.S. Constitution, and then any appeal to rights under that Constitution. Divide, remove appeal to rights, and create a false culture war in a manufactured narrative towards civil war, fought not by hapless reactionaries, but by disposable men. But reality, life, has a tendency to throw tea into oceans.
Kids will grow like weeds on a fence. She says they look for the light. They try to make sense. They'll come up through the cracks like grass on the tracks. She touches him goodbye.